Hello, and welcome to the Washington Monthly. I'm your host, Ann Kim.
And I'm your co-host, Garrett Epps.
In this week's episode, who is the #1 college in America?
Our mission is to accept as many students who have great academic possibility and promise. They bring their gifts to us. They bring their talents to us. We want to give them a gift in return, which is trying to fund as much of their education as possible.
Washington Monthly Editor-in-Chief Paul Glastris speaks with Cheryl Nixon, president of Berea College in Kentucky. Berea College is ranked #1 in Washington Monthly's 2025 College Guide and Rankings.
Dr. Nixon, thank you for coming. Welcome to the Washington Monthly podcast, and congratulations. How does it feel to be ranked the #1 college in America?
Thank you so much. Of course, it's thrilling. We are just absolutely over the moon about this ranking. And I think you know what I'm going to say. It's because this ranking is trying to do ranking differently and trying to really come up with a different way to assess the value of higher ed. So we're just so proud that Berea can be #1 in this way of putting a different lens on what makes higher ed work and what makes higher ed important.
Well, I want to find out what's been the reaction on campus. How have your students said anything? Your faculty, your board, the local media? Fascinated to hear.
Yes, of course, it's struck everyone as an incredibly celebratory moment. We just started classes last Wednesday, so to have this happen in the first week of classes, it's building lots of excitement on top of an already positive start to the year. I was able to let my board know. Of course, they're thrilled and just so excited that Berea is getting that attention. We're small but mighty, right? And our board knows that. And today I just was only within the last hour or so went out into the dining room and talked to students. I had sent out an email this morning telling them to look at the website, look at the magazine and get excited. And they're thrilled. One thing that characterizes our students is that they're often quite humble. And so that idea that they've gotten some recognition for the hard work that they're doing, they're thrilled. They were just sort of sparkling on campus today.
That's great. Great to hear. Well-deserved. Tell our audience, I'm going to guess 99% of our audience doesn't know much about your institution. Tell us about Berea. Where is it located? Where in relation to the cities that, our listeners and readers may know, and something about its history?
Right. Sure. And I can keep this quick, but I'm sure you'll have some follow-up questions for me. So we're in Berea, Kentucky, and Berea, the college, was founded before the city. We're a small college, only about 1,550 students, so 1,550 small, but that allows us to do a very unique model. We were the first interracial, coeducational college in the South, founded by an abolitionist minister. So we sort of had a radical founding. And one of the things we've done to carry through on that idea of a bit of a radical mission, trying to say that education is about opportunity, especially for people that might feel that educational doors are closed to them. Over time, that mission has become more and more focused on educational access for students that don't have economic means. So right now, our entering class that just entered is 99% Pell eligible students.
And for those who don't know what Pell eligible means, this is students sort of moderate to low income.
Right. And we do try to say that our mission is to accept as many students who have great academic possibility and promise. They bring their gifts to us. They bring their talents to us. We want to give them a gift in return, which is trying to fund as much of their education as possible. So we do take students, trying to find all Pell students. That means that typically the family income is going to be $40,000 to $50,000 a year or less. We started in 1892, so over 100 years ago, to have a no tuition model. So again, we try to say our founding was a bit radical, trying to educate Black and white students together before the Civil War. Then in 1892, again, a little bit radical, saying we're going to try to go no tuition. and make education not have money, finances be a barrier. And what we did at that moment was started to move towards what we call now our work college model, which means that students started to work on campus to help defray their costs. That became an element of what became a federal work college model. So now we do get federal funding to be a work college, and all of our students have a job on campus for all 4 years.
And is that the same as work study? I mean, most students know about work study, but work college is different?
It's a version of work study, but it is a very different version in that every student on campus is required to work, and they work for 10 hours. For us, they work for 10 hours a week at least. What they get is a scholarship that goes directly against their tuition costs, rather than getting a paycheck that would come to them in work study. You'd get a paycheck, and students in work study then have to budget their money and then pay a tuition bill. This is a work college model as a way for students to work, have a guaranteed job all 4 years that gives them a substantial scholarship, around $10,000 a year. It goes directly towards their tuition.
Fascinating. And what sort of jobs do students perform on campus? I think for the average person who may have done work study, a typical job is handing out towels in the gym or something. What is different at Berea?
We do have some jobs like that, but I would say one of the things we're trying to do, again, to be innovative, is to offer more different types of jobs and jobs that align with career pathways. We also are very proud that we have lots of jobs on campus that allow students to explore different talents and interests. So I'll just give you a few examples. So Berea has a farm and a forest. And so if you're an agricultural major, you might decide, I'll go work on the farm. You might be required to do that to align with a class. You might be a student who's a computer science major, but have always loved the forest, the idea of being out in nature. So you might do that as a job, as a break from your academic classes. However, another student might want to do our forestry minor, and so they're working in the forest as part of their academic program. We have a great craft program. It's nationally known. Some of our craft work is in the Smithsonian. I've got a quilt right behind me. And some of our students work in our craft department, again, finding their artistic talents. But mostly what we're teaching there is the idea of design and taking sort of the problem of how do you create a new product, design something that's a personal expression. How do you deeply find creativity? So we have a wide range of jobs like that that are a bit out of the box, alongside of things like students do tutoring. They do volunteering service type work in the community with things like our food bank. They do work as teaching assistants on campus. So we have students who work in our IT department that repair broken computers or create new software design. And those students are definitely on their way to a good job when they graduate.
And tell us a little bit about the demographics of your students. You told us, the kind of the typical family income is $40,000, $50,000. Are they mostly from the area, from Kentucky, from around the country?
Yes. Our mission is serving our region. We do take students from across the country and internationally, but primarily from Kentucky and Appalachia. 65% of our students are from that region. And again, wanting to serve our region and the students that deserve educational opportunity. So trying to do outreach into small rural communities is part of our mission, and say you do have a route to college. You do have access to a top, academically rigorous college. 65% of our students from Kentucky and Appalachia, and 72% of our alumni stay in that region.
Interesting.
Right. So we feel that is part of our mission, is to be that engine of opportunity, that engine, again, of kind of economic promise. But your rankings really make it clear, that idea of being there in terms of service to the community, in terms of mobility, in terms of the types of jobs that are needed in our region. We really take that seriously. Draw from our region and return students to it.
just for our audience to know the difference, you are a liberal arts college.
Yes,
there are plenty of liberal arts colleges that people have heard of, highly selective liberal arts colleges that are very elite. And you're like that too. But at most elite colleges, the students come from all over the country and they scatter all over the country, primarily to the big cities, to New York, to San Francisco, to Boston, Chicago. That you're a little bit different in that way. And the other way that you're different, at least so we've heard, is the percentage of students on Pell at other colleges at your level on our rankings, 5, 10, 15% are Pell, you're at 99. So just for folks to understand the difference. But one of the things that I think is the same, so I've heard, and I'd love you to tell us more about it, is your academic rigor. We do a little section in the write-up that we did in the story, 25 class colleges, the profile of Berea, and it looks at what students say online. And I got to tell you, students online say Berea is really academically very tough. Tell us about that.
It is. And again, we believe in that, right? We want to have students that want that academic challenge. And again, that they feel the doors are open wide to them, that they can get that highest quality possible education without having to worry about cost. So I'll give you examples of some of our majors. One of them, ones that you really call out, is nursing, right? Very rigorous, but that's exactly the type of career that's needed, say, in rural Appalachia. We need nurses. Educators. So we do make sure that we're training students that want to go back and serve their community by being teachers. But also our top major is computer science and business, are two of our top majors. That stands in my mind, for that idea of economic growth for our region, that we need people that are going to be, the smartest entrepreneurial or managerial thinkers that can go out and help our region say, here's the next business that makes sense for a place like Kentucky, or again, makes sense in an entrepreneurial way for a small rural regional town that needs to kind of maybe reinvent itself a bit. So those are the types of majors that we offer. Again, very rigorous. We do want our students, for example, to go to graduate school. We need doctors. We definitely want our students, if they see that as their path, that they're very well prepared to go in that direction too.
And what sorts of, when you say computer science, business, are there some employers our audience would have heard of? Is it more entrepreneurial?
Right. Anything from larger companies like an Amazon to a local company that's named Red Hat, that is more working in the software industry. Mm-hmm. So we're excited that we sort of have that whole range. Anything from Google, I'm sort of checking my facts, but Lexmark, Bank of America, Wells Fargo, right? Microsoft, Google, those names, Amazon, the big names you might know. And then making sure that, again, we can also serve some of our smaller, more regional needs too.
Speaking of your rigor, maybe it's the rigor that explains some of the numbers in our rankings that I want to kind of quote back to you. And one of them is that the average earnings of a Berea student after college, 9 years, I think, after they start, is $5,000 greater than you would predict by the demographics of those students. In other words, similar students going to similar schools make 9 years out $5,000 less than Berea students. How do you explain that? And it's Kentucky, right? So it's not like you're in Silicon Valley and the average salary is so high. You're doing that in the midst of the border South.
Right. I think there's several reasons, one of which is to say that we have the great model of proving that the liberal arts is a route towards high-paying jobs. Why? Because we're a small campus where students get to know their faculty. They're in small classes. So it is rigorous. There's some pressure involved in that. They have to engage in depth in things like, just a typical class is going to have all sorts of questions, answers, small conversation. They have to be quick on their feet. They have to know how to work as teams. They have to know how to pivot and be flexible in solutioning. Also, they're going to be in small laboratories where they're getting hands-on experience, say in the latest medical technologies. and they will have a faculty member by their side training them. So those are some of the things I think most colleges would say a liberal arts education does well. A small college experience and making sure that the students have that mentorship of a faculty member. So that model works for us here at Berea. It really does. We feel that our students are getting a very rigorous, well-rounded education. We combine that with the work college model. And that is where they will learn skills that are those sort of essential backbones of what you need in the real world, whether it's time management. I just said the word solution, kind of problem solving, oral communication, doing presentations, even things like being able to take direction from a supervisor and understanding how to translate that into being successful in the workplace. Our students have 4 years of practicing that. So I think
is some of that internship based, or is it most of the work for faculty? How does that work?
Most of the work is on campus. So all 4 years, they have a guaranteed on-campus position. So again, we have a large infrastructure that helps place them in jobs that are a good match for them. In addition, however, we encourage every single student to do a fully funded internship off campus over the summer. And so that is where students can go to New York, Washington, they could go to Silicon Valley and get that real life experience that can line them up for a career.
Let me just quote a couple more figures from the rankings that I just think our audience ought to know about. The net price of a year at Berea is $3,395. Right? That is, I don't know, about a quarter what the average price, net price of a public university is in this country. And you have, I believe it's the lowest debt level of graduates of any college in the country, something like, I don't know, $4,000. Again, how do you do it? How much of that is the work college model?
Yeah, I will even give you some updated figures in that right now, the average debt that we're seeing for our students right now is around $2,500, a little under that. So we're getting it down. Every year we're chipping away at this because we do feel this is our mission, is to sort of prove there are ways to show a different economic model for higher ed. And right now our entering first year class, 80% of our entering first year class is paying zero for their education. And that means zero tuition. None of our students pay tuition, but that also is zero for housing, food, and fees. So again, we are trying to get students to get as close to zero as possible. And if they do have to worry about some cost, and they might have to take out a loan, we are trying to get that as low as possible. I mean, that's the entire debt is under $3,000, our average debt.
Yeah, that's just amazing. It's just amazing.
I will be honest, the biggest issue is that we have to work within federal financial aid. So we have to follow rules that FAFSA sets in place. So we can't over award. In other words, we cannot give students more funding than their FAFSA dictates. So that's why some students might have a small amount, is that FAFSA might say your family can make this type of contribution. And I'll just give you a quick preview. What we are working on is the next groundbreaking thing we hope to do is, since that amount is so small for many of our students, is to offer them a summer job or a summer payment possibility that is equivalent to whatever their FAFSA or their term bill is saying they have to pay. So that if they're being told you have to pay $2,000 because you have that family ability, that we could say, well, we'll give you a summer job that could pay that $2,000. So We're trying to work on new ways to look at a comprehensive packaging, attacking all elements of this. So how do we do it is the question. I'll give you a very quick answer. It's a combination of, I like to think of it as a three-legged stool. Number one is the work college model. That gives students a way that they are working, and some of the college funding comes from that work college model. Secondly is we do have federal funding in the form of Pell Grants. So students are getting Pell Grants or other forms of state, they're often getting a state scholarship. But third, the biggest contribution to their education is that we do have a large endowment. So again, 100 years when we went tuition free, it was just a stroke of genius that started to ask for small donations. So over many, many years, not just like say one big donor, but many small donations. And our board was very prescient and said all of that needs to be saved and use only the returns from that investment to fund education. So we have a large endowment, and that is our tuition replacement fund.
Can I ask, how big is the endowment?
So it's about $1.6 billion. So
that's a lot of money for a school of 1,500 students. Wow.
Yeah.
Well, you're spending it well.
Yeah. And that's one of the reasons that we are very proud to say, though, that we're trying to do things differently, and that all of the returns from that endowment are used 100% to fund our students' education. That's why we can offer things like saying, come in and we'll match you with a zero cost.
So you're not creating buildings named, for the donors or institutes looking into the future of whatever. You're spending it on tuition discounts.
Right. And housing and food, right? So that other things, like we were just mentioning, internships. As we know, some of the costs in higher ed have gotten very difficult due to things like the need for lots of high tech on campus, keeping our students, working with the latest technology, keeping our students having the best counseling and sort of mental health care. We've seen those costs skyrocket. So we are fortunate that we have our endowment that we're able to use to make sure we're giving a sort of a top rate education, again, to students who really deserve it, and trying to cover those costs ourselves.
So if a student's interested in Berea and we haven't interested them enough with the low costs and the high rewards, tell us a little bit about life on the campus. Where do students live? Is it mostly on campus, mostly dorms? Is it off campus? What do they do for fun? Tell us about that.
Yeah, so we are, again, a small liberal arts college. Most of our students live on campus all 4 years. So we provide housing for all of our students. A few will maybe live off campus, but that's a very small number. That leads to a really tight-knit community. So again, it's a certain type of student that we want to attract. We want someone who wants rigorous academics, wants to practice those skills in a workplace, but also likes the idea of a home away from home that's a smaller community feel. What that means, though, is students get to know each other well. They get to know their faculty well. They get to know me well. I'm out there walking around campus. Also, they have lots of opportunities that, again, there's no barriers to. So if a student wants to try out for an athletic team, we welcome them into playing any sport. We have great music ensembles and dance ensembles and great arts on campus. So students are encouraged, again, to try those things out without a lot of barriers or competition. One thing that makes us special also is we have a way that we like to talk about the uniqueness of who we are. And again, it goes back to our founder and some of his radical abolitionist beliefs. We like to talk about our great commitments. And so we actually have a really unique mission in that we say that we want to strive for deeper values, sort of higher principles. And that are things like equality. We call it kinship of all people. And when we talk about interracial education, we talk about sustainability. We talk about service. And that is a high thing that Washington Monthly emphasizes.
Well, I wanted to say, you all are one of the highest scoring on service, and we measure service by whether a college helps make it easy for students to vote, whether they participate in ROTC, whether their students participate in AmeriCorps, and you all and go into fields, like you said, nursing, these socially beneficial majors. So you all do very well on that too.
Right. And so again, we're attracting a certain type of student that not every student needs to go in that path, but many do want to. And I think that does create, again, this sense of we're a very meaningful education. Our students are searching for meaning. They're searching for, what is that purpose? What am I going to do with this education? How can I give back? So I think that's part of our culture on campus that we're really, really proud of.
So say your student we've now convinced them that they should apply. What should they do? How do they maximize their chance of getting into Berea?
So they just look on our website and they can find our admissions connection, and they can link right into admissions and ask for more information. What we do is we ask students right away to make sure that they meet our financial criteria, in that we do want students that need economic support. So students will have to meet a financial need criteria. Again, we try to do things differently. We're not asking you for
every other college in the country does the opposite, right? You do know that.
Right. We're trying not to accept you if you have too much money. I know
that's just not how it's done.
It sounds like a crazy model, but clearly it's taken us over 100 years to build this model up. But of course, we're very proud of it. So that is part of it, is that we do check your sort of financial background. And we do check that you want to be at a smaller campus where you will be challenged. You'll be asked to think deep thoughts. You'll be asked to do hands-on projects, do some undergraduate research, do that internship. So we're looking for students that all of that sounds exciting to them.
And maybe mop a floor here and there, right?
Right. Exactly.
So tell us a little bit about yourself, Dr. Nixon. You did go to a very elite school. You got your PhD, I believe, at Harvard, but you've spent most of your career not in the areas of higher education that cater to the sort of classic elite student from an upper middle class family and so forth. Tell us about your path to Berea via this other path.
Right. I started my academic career as an English professor, and you wouldn't know it today, but I was one of those shy kids that loved to read, quite literally under the covers, and sort of found my calling in books. I worked at institutions that, again, I was working with, say, entering first year students and trying to get them to have that love of literature and reading also. I spent most of my career at University of Massachusetts, Boston, and UMass Boston has the mission of trying to serve the citizens of Boston. It's a commuter campus, and really, again, has that principled idea of access to education. I started teaching literature classes there and realized my passion became trying to make sure that students were successful in reading and writing, especially when English was not their first language. Very diverse student body at UMass Boston, and realized for them, their barrier, for many students, a barrier could be having to take that English class with me. If they don't do well in that class, they might not be able to get that degree. That pivoted me to become increasingly passionate about how can we make sure that we open the doors of opportunity for students to get a college degree, but we retain them. We make sure that they are successful, and we work on those core skills, reading, writing, math with them. Those are often barriers. And so that became my passion. And then after working at UMass Boston, I worked at a small liberal arts college in Colorado, Fort Lewis College. That is an institution that is a non-tribal Native American serving institution, wanting to work again with a population that often had some barriers to educational opportunity. So again, just over time, really found that passion of whether it was recent immigrants to the United States, Native Americans, here in Appalachia, rural students. The through line has been students that maybe haven't had economic ability to pay. And again, saying that shouldn't be a barrier. And then once they're in that classroom, wanting to just see that spark of excitement and curiosity and discovery, and say that's what education is about. And I'm a big believer in the old-fashioned thing called the American dream, right? And that education is a route to the American dream.
Yeah, well, it's corny, and yet that also fires our college ranking. And when we find those instances in higher ed that really do live up to the ideal, we want to bring them to our audience. Let's pivot a little bit to what it is that. So, as you well know, this is a very tough time for higher ed. An administration that is decimating research budgets, trying to take over university governance, doesn't take kindly to university administrators that use words like inclusive and equity. Tell us what lessons you think Berea has to teach in this era where, and it's not, let me just say, one administration. There's pretty broad sense in America that universities, like all institutions, are less trustworthy than they used to be. There's a lot of disgruntlement on a lot of fronts with higher education right now. What do you think the lessons of Berea are to that challenge?
I think the first lesson is that financial economic model that we are trying to create. There's been a lot of questioning of the value of higher education. That idea that students are paying too much and then graduating and can't get a job that will pay back their debt. So I think saying that we at Berea are trying to create a model that turns inside out that idea of pay and debt for your degree. Again, not every college maybe can go to the extreme that we've been able to do, but I think that we are here in partnership and trying to say, higher ed, let's work together on thinking of some new ways for that financial model so that opportunity really doesn't have to be dependent on things like taking out school loans. I think, again, we can continue to work collectively to come up with some solutions like those that Berea is experimenting with. I think another element of what we stand for is that idea of service to our region. And for all the attacks that are happening right now on higher ed, I think we have to step back and say their route to America's success is often still needed, not in all cases, but needs those college degrees. Again, we need trained healthcare workers. We need those nurses and doctors. If we look ahead to artificial intelligence, we're going to need students that are smart, critical thinkers that can outthink the machines, right? Who is going to be programming that and being able to work with the ideas that will come out of an artificial atmosphere? We really need students who can manage that. And as I was saying earlier, even just the entrepreneurial or creative spirit, students coming from high school might need a few more years to figure out what that means to take a creative dream, an entrepreneurial dream, and make it reality. What are those steps that you can actually do to make something like a new small business successful? A college degree is going to help you do that. So I think that idea of college providing the time, the space, the expertise to do things that our region needs, whether that's anything from healthcare to business, again, that's, I think, one of the things that we want to stand up for. And then lastly, I would say around the issues of diversity, I would want to say very strongly, we're an institution that tries to define diversity in very different ways. We stand up for saying we're an open door for all elements of what we want to call America. That includes economic diversity, right? Students from all different economic backgrounds, all different types of political thought. We're in a conservative state, right? So we want to sort of expand and move away from maybe a way to use some of that terminology in a divisive way and say, one of the things that makes college special is that it does bring together people with very different opinions, and it gets them into a classroom together where you have to learn from each other. I think that is part of what's made America strong, made America great. And so again, we're trying to do that day in and day out on a small campus like Berea.
Well, Dr. Nixon, I hope that somebody in Washington hears this podcast, watches this podcast, and decides to have you come up and tell your story, because I think they need to hear it here in Washington. It is inspiring. Just to be clear, you're the number one college among more than 1,400 colleges that the Washington Monthly ranked in its best colleges for your tuition and tax dollars list. Thank you for coming on. Congratulations. And I hope that we'll see you in Washington real soon.
Thank you so much. I can't wait to visit you. And I do want to say a big thanks for coming up with a ratings that works in this fashion, that is trying to dig into higher ed and say there's got to be a better way that we assess the value of higher education. Yes, it's economic value, but we so appreciate that idea that service and trying to contribute to the public good is really part of what higher education should be rated on. So we thank you for that. And of course, we're thrilled that we came out on top of it. So thank you so much.
That's it for this week from the Washington Monthly. I'm Ann Kim, and on behalf of my co-host, Garrett Epps, thank you for listening. If you like what you heard, don't forget to subscribe to our channel or wherever you get your podcasts. Have a wonderful week.